All right, so what I want to talk about is actually generally using small amounts of energy we're putting in the brain, just as we've been talking about, to achieve different modifying consciousness, to achieve higher states of consciousness. And in doing so, let's see, which way do we trigger this? Oh, okay, got it. All right, so what we're looking at is placing small amounts of energy into the brain to achieve the states of consciousness that we desire. But also what we want is some learning to happen so that these states become a trait. So you can have a change of state of consciousness but not have enough learning so that this state is not accessible to you without the intervention. All right, so we've already looked at there's many possibilities. There's current, direct current, alternating current. There's also pulsed electromagnetic frequency and ultrasound, all in small intensities. Then there's photobiomodulation, which is putting light into the brain. So basically, adding this kind of energy into the brain, especially now I'll be talking about electromagnetic energy and light, which is also a form of electromagnetic energy. It's a new method. So you can change state by a behavioral intervention, by meditation, by yoga. You can change state by taking a substance. And now we have a third possibility, a third path, if you will, which is to actually inject a certain amount of energy at a certain frequency at a certain location in the brain to achieve the desired state. And what we are finding is that this actually amplifies and accelerates both the change of state as well as the learning that comes, so to be able to access this kind of state. So I will be talking a little bit about direct current and alternating current, highlighting some points. I've spoken about that here in the past, and then we'll move on to photobiomodulation. So one thing that these modalities do, even in low amounts, is to add actual real energy to the system. So you're actually adding energy and electrons into the system. So here's a study from 1982, which talks about putting small amounts of current into rat skin. So at very low, 500 microamperes, 0.5 milliamperes. But that amount of current actually increased the production of ATP, the energy molecule in the system, by 500%, and increased protein synthesis by 70%, and increased amino acid transport by 40%. And back about 20 years ago, I had chronic fatigue, I was pretty depressed, and I started reading about this kind of action of current and other possibilities. And I actually went out to Radio Shack, bought a couple of batteries, a couple of gold electrodes, thought about how I could do this safely, and hooked myself up on my wrist to try some DC stimulation. So this was way before some of the earliest studies came out. And I found that it actually was quite beneficial. I'm pretty sensitive energetically, and I could feel how it was boosting my energy system. And indeed, soon after that, some of the initial studies came out, and the maximum evidence we have for TDCS is in the case of depression. That's been shown repeatedly in several studies to help with depression. And I'm a clinician by trade, so that's what I've been doing for 25 years before I came over here to join Jeffrey and Jay. And I have used TDCS along with other therapeutic methods to help people with depression and to help myself with depression. And I will do it in the clinic, and also I will give people a unit to use at home under supervised use, and have had a lot of success with almost no side effects. So studies show that TDCS can increase both the speed of learning as well as the ceiling of learning, and it can be stacked with other interventions. So Jay's lab actually, Vince Clark in Jay's lab showed that TDCS can be used to accelerate or improve task learning in threat detection for the Army. Of course, we are interested in improving learning for meditation, and both Jay and Bashar have already talked about the e-meditation retreats that's happening in Vermont. And if you move on to alternating current, what alternating current does is to give us the power of frequency. So what you see up here on this slide is a treatment that's happening for fibromyalgia for this patient. And we look at the effect of this kind of AC current on pain, inflammation, and endorphins in the body. So this patient is receiving alternating current treatment at the neck and at the feet using 2 channels of current. And this is a study a clinical study of 54 patients with fibromyalgia. And in this study, patients started out with an average pain of 7.4 out of 10. And in 90 minutes, their pain went down to 1.3. And all 54 patients experienced pain relief, and 58% of them had full remission within 4 months. And this is with very low amounts of current. Now, most TDCS studies use currents in the order of 2 milliamperes, 1 to 2 milliamperes. This is half a milliampere or 1/10 of a milliampere. You can barely feel anything's happening. But the effects are very strong, and they have to do with the frequency. So only one frequency combination works to reduce this kind of pain, and that is a combination of 40 hertz and 10 hertz. It turns out that 40 hertz is a very significant frequency in the brain and the body, as we shall see later. So some of these patients had, the blood was tested by scientists at NIH, and that showed that inflammation markers like interleukin reduced from an average of 400 to 20 in 90 minutes. So that's 20 times less. The endorphin levels went up by 10 times. So you would have to do a pretty long run or meditate for a long time to get that kind of change in endorphin levels. So what we're starting to see is the possibilities of using low amounts of energy in the right way, the right frequency, to achieve major changes in body chemistry. And we can see that happening if we start to look at photobiomodulation. So this trend continues when we look at putting light in the body. So low-level light therapy is coming to a place near you or in your home soon. It turns out that infrared light therapy has many positive effects on biological tissues. So if we are interested in looking at near-infrared light, and turns out that when near-infrared light shines on the body, it affects the mitochondria, which are the energy powerhouses of the cell. It is absorbed by an enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase, which increases the electron transfer, produces more ATP, so the cell has more energy to work with, releases nitric oxide, which is toxic to the cell but beneficial to the bloodstream, releases it in the bloodstream, which improves blood flow. And there's increased oxygenation, increased oxygen uptake, a release of small amounts of reactive oxygen species, which activate beneficial cell signaling. So if we were to able to shine near-infrared light onto the brain, we get many positive effects: reduction in inflammation, increased oxygen uptake, and increase in repair and other enhanced functional activities. So V-Light was one of the first companies to come up with a headset with 810 nanometers of near-infrared light to shine through the skull and up the nose as well. So it turns out that the skull is pervious to light. Who knew, right? There's always a certain amount of light that's entering the skull, very low amounts, but there's always light entering the skull. And if you shine more light through the LEDs at the right frequencies, like 810 nanometers and other therapeutic windows, then these beneficial effects start to accrue in the brain. So soon after, they started selling this helmet, which actually also flashed at 10 hertz, because it turned out that 10 hertz helped more light to pass through the skull. Then it was discovered by an MIT experiment at Size Lab, published in 2016. It's a famous experiment now. That what Size Lab did was to put a flickering light in the mice cages, and these are Alzheimer mice models. And this light flickered at 40 hertz for 1 hour a day for 7 days. Then they sacrificed the mice and discovered that their the plaque load, the beta amyloid plaque, reduced by over 50% in the visual cortex. And they tried all other frequencies. Only 40 hertz had this effect. So pretty quickly, came out with a headset that flickers at 40 hertz called the NeuroGamma. And the idea there is that if you're flashing infrared light into the whole brain at 40 hertz, then maybe you can reduce or improve cognitive function, reduce plaque or improve cognitive function in the whole brain, not just in the visual cortex. And indeed, initial studies show improved cognitive benefit for people who are suffering from any kind of cognitive decline or even PTSD. And in my clinical practice, I have used V-Light headsets for several years, and I've used them successfully with clients with cognitive decline along with other interventions. So currently, they have a major trial planned, or a double-blind random controlled trial planned for FDA approval. And then Jay's lab took the NeuroGamma, and they repeated the study for threat detection in the lab, and they showed that that indeed NeuroGamma is even more successful at improving learning on the threat detection task than TDCS. So this is quite powerful. So we can ask the question, when we flash light at 40 hertz, 40 times a second on the brain, are we actually increasing the EEG signal at 40 hertz inside the brain? So Lou Lim's group showed recently that that is indeed the case. So when you flash the infrared light at 40 hertz, you not only increase the power at 40 hertz, you also increase the power in alpha around 10 hertz, as well as some power in beta in the middle. So the whole brain gets a boost, and certainly you get more gamma, which is around the range of 40 hertz. Now, of course, we are more interested in meditation, not just in health benefits. And so there are many studies that show that meditators have increased gamma at rest compared to non-meditators. Not only that, many meditations show high gamma activity in several areas of the cortex when the meditation is happening. But this gamma activity is not limited to around 40 hertz. It actually can be anywhere in the range of 40 to 200 hertz. So we asked the question, what if we were to able to induce this kind of gamma activity in the brain somehow? Now, I'm also a neurofeedback practitioner. I've been doing neurofeedback for many years. And basically, we haven't done gamma neurofeedback. We even tried it recently. It's very difficult to do. Firstly, people didn't think about gamma till recently. Secondly, it's very difficult to do because that signal is hard to detect from the brain. It really attenuates through the brain, and there's a lot of muscle artifact. You can't really do it properly. So then we thought, what if we were to use the V-Light helmet to induce high levels of high-frequency gamma in the brain? Then what would happen? So we had V-Light make an experimental unit for us that we could flash at any frequency we like. And so the first unit they gave us could go up to 200 hertz. And we started to experiment with this. And I tried it on myself. And it was pretty amazing. So I noticed that an immediate deepening of my PNSE state and an increase in sensory clarity, increase in joy, and increase in a deep calm. And this stayed for a long time. It's almost, for me, it's almost put me over the edge, caused some kind of permanent shift and deepening. So I was excited to have other people try it. So here we have Chuladasa. So Jay referred to him as the author of The Mind Illuminated, the meditation teacher, trying it. And we had him, we started low, at a low frequency of stimulation around 1 hertz, and went up slowly and had him talk about his experience at various frequencies, especially at multiples of 40, such as 80 hertz, 120 hertz, 160 hertz, and 200 hertz. And he reported that at 200 hertz, he felt that it helped him to have easy access to the highest levels in his system, which is level 9 and 10, which Jay talked about. And so he thought, oh, that's interesting. We'll have other people try it. And other people started to report, other long-term meditators are the most people we've tried that with, and they report something similar. Here's Shinzen trying this recently, and Shinzen reported increased feelings of vibratory flow, a deep calm, a no-thought state, and then woke up having more energy to function. So another interesting thing that I've been observing with this is that because of the level of, maybe because of the level of energy going into the brain and the healthful benefits, that even though I go into a deep calm state when I'm using this and feel deeply rested, I actually have more energy to function and have more motivation. So that's another issue that we sometimes find with a lot of meditation, internal meditation practice, is there's less tendency to engage the world. And I find that this is often not the case for me when I'm doing this. In fact, sometimes the opposite has been observed. A few people who we had simply run at higher frequencies, say 120 hertz, reported difficulties in sleeping, too much energy, too much arousal, in fact. And so we'll be talking more about how we deal with that. So if we just look at high frequency stimulation, and which is basically something new. So we've had, for example, you all know about audiovisual stimulation devices that have been around for a long time. And we have neurofeedback that's been happening to reward these frequencies for a long time. What we haven't really looked at is what happens with high frequency stimulation, especially also showing that it actually does increase gamma in the brain. Then if we can do that, what is the result of doing that? So typically at 40 hertz, people start to report increased focus, increased self-observation, equanimity. At 80 hertz, you get more positive emotion, joy, vibratory flow. At 100 hertz and above, feelings of expansion and deep calm, decrease in thought. So, however, not everybody, now most of the people we've worked with are people who are long-term meditators, who are connected to the body, who can report well on their subjective experience. Not everybody will report this, especially depending on how connected they are and how deep they can usually go. So what we find is that this device can help people to access optimal states that they already have some access to, and then it's easy for them to notice, oh, I'm already there, this made it easy. And the other thing we find is that different people have different frequencies that they prefer that are optimal for them. So for example, we work with I had a shaman try it, and she loved it. She wanted to do it again and again, and she said at 200 hertz, she could go straight to the place in her consciousness which she goes to when she does shamanic healing. This made it easy for her to go there and maintain it, and then she did a lot of her inner work while hooked up at 200 hertz. So on the other hand, she wanted to go higher than 200 hertz. So did Chuladasa, so did Shinzen, so did Jeffrey, so did I. Okay, so Vielight just made another unit for us that goes to higher frequencies. So in the same vein, we had another teacher try it, and he could feel the subtle distinctions at different frequencies, and his optimal state was 170 hertz. Now just today, I hooked up another person, and she said, oh, the higher frequencies are great. I'm quite familiar with it. What I want is 1 hertz. And the reason she also said that is because I usually start people at a low frequency before we go high. And the idea here that we're looking at is that we can think of frequencies as indices to different mind-body states. So when we increase power at low frequencies, we get subjective experiences that have to do more with body energy. They take you deep relaxation, more into the body, more into the realm of the unconscious and the collective unconscious, the personal unconscious, and the pre-personal. So I was talking with Juan Acosta yesterday, and he told me he has been doing EEG maps on people having Kundalini experiences. And typically when they have a Kundalini experience, they show very high levels of delta and theta, which are in the low realm, from 1 to 8 hertz. So the increase in power at the low frequencies have to do with the body energies. And then if you go high, in the higher realms, we enter more the realm of feeling more transcendent, more expanded out of the body, and the more transpersonal realms. So we can think of different mind-body states in this context as a combination of different frequencies. This is a useful way to think. At some point in my meditation, because of my depressive tendencies, I found that I had a lot of sinking mind and low energy. And when I learned about neurofeedback, I did some training of beta waves, and that produced a balanced state of mind for me, because that's what I needed. I needed more of that kind of frequency and energy for a balanced meditation state. So what we're looking to do there with this kind of technology is to increase the depth, the breadth, and the flexibility of access to different mind states. And this is very good for integrating, as we can think of also when there's a shift to fundamental well-being, one of the things that happens is that there's a zoom out effect where you're not so caught in your internal narrative, and you have a meta position from which to observe the personality and the self. However, that does not mean that all your conditioning has disappeared. So this kind of technology can be very useful in the deconditioning process or the embodiment process. So if you think of meditation as a balance of opposite factors, such as calmness versus energy, equanimity versus joy, concentration versus investigation, different combinations of states connected with different frequencies will produce different factors. So one person may need more equanimity, another person may need more of the joy and bliss factor, another person may need more calmness, another person may need more energy. So we can start to think about individualizing what a person needs. So for example, the person that said she wanted 1 hertz and she loved the experience of it, that's where she's focused, or maybe that's what she needs. And so you might be familiar with the work of Anna Weiss and Maxwell Cade, who studied Zen meditators, and at that point, earlier they weren't looking at gamma, now they are, and they discovered that Zen meditators had simultaneous synchrony in multiple EEG bands. So they could produce high power in multiple bands, which they considered as being able to have information travel up and down these bands. So in terms of some sort of optimal protocol, usually when I hook up people, I start at a low frequency and go up. And we can think of it as creating a base of relaxation and body connection on which the high frequencies can ride. And this also goes along with ideas in neuroscience, where we find the concept of cross-frequency coupling, where the high frequencies use the lower frequencies as carrier waves to ride on in the brain. So, of course, what we want to end up with is to help to individualize the treatment, not just from the subjective experience of the person doing it, but also by looking at various biological parameters such as their EEG. Another interesting discovery that we've had in this context is the question of timing, that timing makes a difference. So, all right, so Jeffrey's telling me my time is up, so I'll say timing makes a difference. Time is up. And I think we'll end with maybe we are trying to reverse the halo effect. Thank you.